I do have a question if
Sure.
we can get going. I'm not sure if what the platform is really like or if questions should be very specific, but I'd like to give you a rough idea as to what we're hoping to pitch and then hear questions from you even so that I can go back to my team and kind of further develop what we should put in our appendix slides for the pitch. So we are hoping to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would love to, and I'm so excited that you are already ready to ask questions, but I think it'd be great if we can introduce the panelists real quick.
Okay, sure.
And then totally, you are first in line
Okay.
for a question. So you will have, it looks like we're getting a few more folks in the channel. And so, panelists today, and I'm going to just have them give just kind of a brief intro of themselves and kind of their background and expertise. Starting with Gerarda Shoretel. She is the CEO of Simplexity Product Development.
And you want me to give my background? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to just give just a little bit of a brief intro?
Sure.
So everyone can get a sense of who you're asking.
Yeah. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've been doing design for, I call it 20 years or so. And so Simplexity does electromechanical hardware design. So we, in terms of the medical side and surgical specifically, we've done catheters. We are ISO 13485 certified. So anything about like how to design in a quality system, I can probably answer those questions and what that process is. And then anything having to do with mechanical engineering, I know, and anything with electrical and firmware and quality and control systems engineering, I know by virtue of other people in my company knowing it. So less depth, but certainly could speak to any questions related to that.
Great. And then Travis Woodland, who is the Director of Innovation and IP at Portland State University.
Yeah, hello. So yeah, my background is primarily chemical engineering. I'm also a lawyer. For the most part, working in academia, I get to be a bit of a generalist, which is really great because I spend most of my time working with students and faculty who have innovations, and many of those from our university are in, either biocare, in new materials. We have a lot of folks working in artificial intelligence, some of which is focused on medical diagnostics and other related things. Our main goal most of the time is to either get that license to an existing firm or help those innovators create a startup company one way or another. And, having been around the block quite a few times with all sorts of technologies related to healthcare, including surgical care, hopefully I'll have some advice that will be helpful to some of the attendees.
Great. And we have our entrepreneur on the panel with a startup. Holly Rockweiler is the CEO and co-founder of Medora.
Hi, yeah. So my background is in biomedical engineering, and I actually started Medora, which is a women's health company, as a spin out of the Stanford Biodesign program. So I have experience in needs-based innovation, needs finding and filtering and pitching, lots and lots of pitching. So I'm happy to help kind of with all sides of that. And I'm excited to be here.
And last, we have Marcelino Alvarez, who is the Chief Product Officer at Fresh Consulting.
Hi, everyone. Marcelino. My background kind of falls into two categories. First half of my career I spent in advertising, so working alongside creative teams and big brands to help tell the stories behind the products that they were bringing to market. I got tired of advertising, and so the second half of my career was spent building products themselves. And so I started a design studio that was acquired last November by a larger consultancy called Fresh Consulting, where I currently sit as Chief Product Officer. My role and my expertise kind of straddles the line of product strategy, sort of the business case for products, and really kind of applying a human-centered design approach to both software, hardware, design, and development. And then there's probably things in between advertising and product design that I kind of geek out on. So feel free to ask any questions that straddle the marketing, customer strategy, and product strategy side of things.
And then I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Charlotte Triplett, and I'm a partner at a venture firm called Aventurine, and we focus on funding science-based companies, as well as the founder of a small consultancy that works with medtech and digital health companies called Catalyze. And so if you want to go ahead and jump back in and start with your question, then we're ready to go. I'm excited that you're You've got questions lined up.
Yeah, sorry for jumping the gun there.
No worries.
So my ability to to be patient in an awkward silence sometimes. Okay, I think this is probably in just product strategy, like trying to help us develop the idea a little bit more and poke holes in it. We are hoping to create a scannable QR code to access electronic health records for patients that are coming in during an emergency situation, possibly unconscious. So like that's kind of the primary, they don't have access to their logins already. And the provider would be able to log in with their platform. Basically, we propose starting with just Epic so that we're only having to harbor one platform's login credentials. But yeah, that's kind of where we're starting at. Would propose to expand, but I'd love to hear any questions that you have that we can address now before we get to our pitch.
Why do you have I guess I don't understand. Kind of is it custom or what's the value?
Go ahead.
I guess there are QR codes out there, so I guess what is the difference in this? I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, so the QR code would be able to make the provider access the health records that are available for that patient.
Oh, okay, so it's just basically
instantly, like
a link to that. Okay.
Without having to call.
It might also help if you talk about the problem that you're trying to solve, because it sounds like that might have been applied, but I think if you start with that may help.
In there. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the problem, picture an unconscious woman comes into the emergency department following a traumatic injury. You don't know anything about her, no allergies, medications, or past medical history. How do you proceed in this emergency situation to address your patient? And in this scenario, our solution would be that you could scan a code and it would take you instantly to a login. Proposed first version would be with Epic platforms. And then you'd be able to see all of their things like My Chart. And Epic has several others that I don't actually know, so I'll write that down.
Marcelino, you want to take a first stab at this?
Sure. So QR codes totally make sense. They're unique, in nature. They can be secure, and obviously they could also, you could also redirect to kind of have some sort of gating of privacy on the other side of it. How do you do that initial kind of sync between that patient's data and that QR code and associate things? How do you quickly generate a QR code that can follow that patient? Is it, something that could be attached to a medical bracelet so that it stays with them throughout services that they might have, versus something that might be, on a chart or better, might be disconnected. So thinking through sort of the initial steps of sort of onboarding the patient into that QR code, thinking of the steps for how that QR code can be secure so that it's not something that perhaps someone just taking a random photo of can capture and then access later. So is there sort of some amount of occlusion? Is it something that can only be accessed, from close proximity? Thinking through some of those kind of edge cases. The mobile application or sort of technology aspects to what the service provider is going to need to do that, and ensuring that they have the appropriate training is probably part of that. So aligning the behaviors that a service provider would need to have with existing behaviors is probably the easiest way to encourage adoption. So in terms of validating your product, understanding how information is currently handled for someone who is unconscious and enters into the emergency room, and finding ways where your process can improve upon that without necessarily creating additional hurdles will increase your likelihood for adoption.
Thank you.
I have one question for you. How are the folks going to know about this? Like, where is this some kind of like medical alert bracelet QR code? Like, what kind of form factor are you thinking?
Our hope would be that it would exist on an insurance card or an ID. Like, it could just be a printout on it or a sticker. But our aim right now in this proposal is that it exists on an insurance card.
Okay.
which does assume that
So
the
somebody's
patient
found their wallet.
Their wallet, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This is a question because I just don't know. If you have the person's name, can you get into their health record already? Or what can you not do? What does your QR code allow them to do?
To reach out to their previous providers in order to obtain their past medical histories, included
So
with like full notes and even scans. And in this theory, using my chart as an example and Epic Systems as an example, all of that information is already stored in that software.
So it's a unifier is what you're proposing?
Yeah. It's for, eventually, yes. For this case, it's only for one platform, but yes.
I thought if you had Epic, you could already pull up all Epic records. I could be completely wrong, but that's something to definitely check into.
I will double check into that. My understanding is that if it's my chart, you can use the same my chart, but that there are other systems owned by Epic that are not interchangeable. I will look into that. Thank you.
So I guess my question is kind of the very front end. How do patients, before they're patients, know, like how's the adoption going to work? How do they know to get this? Is it going to be through the insurance company? Is it going to be through their doctor? Is it going to be through direct to consumer marketing? I mean, what is the plan there in terms of getting awareness and adoption of the system, assuming the system that works?
Right. Our plan would be to go through the insurance company as sort of a requirement with them for their coverage. But there are some caveats in that if you're already on an Epic system, in theory, you've already gone through that software and logged into MyChart and have that information in a way.
Okay.
So I'm not super familiar with Epic as the platform. I understand it's a patient records database. What kind of information, do you think that this emergency services provider, would need to know the most? And is there already a way that that's displayed, or is it something that, that QR code would uniquely bring up that would provide rapid information that was actionable by the person that was going to provide care?
It's a good question. Some of that information is available via a medical alert bracelet for people who have severe allergies or possible chronic conditions. The additional information we were hoping to provide is allergies that you might not carry a bracelet for, past medicines or current medicines that might have contraindications that most people aren't wearing any information about, as well as the past medical history that hopefully contains any chronic illness information, as if somebody has previously seen, somebody for a heart condition and they're coming into the ER now and, you don't know how to address it, let's say in this scenario, but are able to then read the report from the cardiologist that worked with them previously. Sure.
Okay. Well, let me ask one follow-up. So when, part of the difficulty with a lot of these types of things is that cross-system integration. And I don't know how many healthcare platforms are out there, but I know there's a lot and they don't interoperate, sometimes a bit on purpose. Do you, as a way of maybe getting around that or even giving the patient more control over their data, do you think there's a way to even prevent it from having to reach into a healthcare system, since the density of the QR code may allow a piece of software to generate a unique code that brings up characteristics, and then that person could hold on to it in some fashion, fixed or digital?
I want to reiterate to make sure I'm understanding your question. Are you saying that basically it wouldn't link to any of the existing softwares or systems, and rather it would just have all that information stored kind of on a separate website that the QR would take them to? Yeah, or a piece of software that could just decode a QR code that's available. Okay. Yeah, I think that's really we're considering for sure. I'll take it back to the team.
Something else to consider and I know because I've had some chats with Epic, is that they essentially have what's called an app store, kind of like, I mean, it's not exactly like an app store for the other things that we're used to, but this sounds like something that would live there. And I think the biggest challenge that you're going to have is what Dorota has sort of addressed, which is who pays for it? Is this like a patient says, hey, I want to have this on my chart, or is this just something that gets added onto the Epic integration? Meaning, if I'm going to, is everybody's Epic going to be able to adopt this? And I think that's, since you're trying to integrate all the different ones, I think that's probably going to be your biggest technical challenge, it sounds like, from just really understanding how to. I know we've got some more folks joining the channel, and some of you may have joined a little bit late. So I want to reiterate that we have a great group of folks that have experience innovating in healthcare, and they have often seen things go from idea all the way through to commercialization. So if anyone has any questions about this, about your projects, if you want to pick brains, this is a great group of super mentors to kind of do that with. We have folks that have background in engineering and product design, as well as are entrepreneurs themselves and are taking products to market currently. So happy to help field questions. If you'd like to ask a question, if you could raise your hand. If you're too shy and you just want to ask it in chat, feel free to type it and I'll be happy to ask those questions for you. Okay, we have a very quiet group. Oh, I've got one. All right. So yeah, go ahead. I've just got one person with reason. I'm not sure what your gifty boat in ENG.
No, I'm Suruchi. I'm Suruchi, and we are working on a problem about the surgeons burnout. Means after 80% say that at one point of time within a 5 years they felt like they left the job or changed the job, and because of that burnout they usually make medical errors, like means not doing a good job at the required place. So we are thinking to develop a device which can measure the stress in those surgeons, that how much burnout is there, how much stress they are there, or depressed. And based on that, we want to prepare a one stress management plan. So there is a two component. So my question is that, and little bit about my background. I have a chemistry background with the management background. I did MBA from the Portland State University. So there is in my team, there is no medical background as such now. So I want to know that, is there any, as you know that a surgeon can't wear any device during the operation theater. So is there any what we call policies or something for to develop a device which we can take inside the operation theater or we can wear outside? So my question is related mostly to the policies, what we need to take care of developing that devices.
Got it. So I'm going to just restate what you said, and then so it sounds like you're wanting to develop some kind of wearable device that can help you measure surgeon different, I'm assuming different parameters, and help you understand how stressed they are, whether they're approaching burnout, and then being able to develop some kind of an app or device.
Yes. I want to know that, is there any restriction or policies which we have to keep in mind, that because we are developing this thing for a medical purpose or for a health practitioner, so is there anything which we have to keep in mind that, okay, you can't do this or you can do this thing?
I don't know if you want to take this one on, or if you have more. I mean, I don't think any of us, I don't know that we have any clinicians in here, but my best guess is not breaking the plane of surgery. Holly, do you know? I would think you could maybe do a
Yeah.
or something.
Staying
Like
sterile
a wearable
would be
that
the
went
most-
on underneath
yeah.
the clothing, I would imagine would be appropriate, because then that's something that's not going to be exposed um, to the surgical field.
Yeah, I would guess the same. As long as you can maintain sterility, that's perfect. I mean, I think a lot of surgeons don't necessarily wear like rings, for example, because they wash their hands so often, and then they could break the gloves if they have, you know, a sharp diamond or something. I don't know. But otherwise, I think there's a lot that's fair as long as you can maintain sterility.
Oh, you're mute. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm muted.
Yeah, you were.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And my second question is that as we don't have an experience in product designing, so can you do, and we know that Fitbit is already in the market and the Apple Watch, there are several things. So we have to make our product really different from those things, that we have to add the value in it. So what do you think that as we are using this as a medical field, then what we should keep in mind, that how we gonna stress, means if I will ask a question that how do you feel when you guys are stressed out, what kind of help you are looking for? So
Is there any,
answer part of that question, maybe. So, you know, to Holly's point, you know, you really have to, you know, be concerned about, you know, sterility, and, you know, the form factor of the device is going to be a large part of that. So, you know, she was mentioning, you know, rarely will you see surgeons wearing rings or wristwatches or, you know, Fitbit type devices while they're in the theater. So, you know, your device is going to have to sort of meet in two spots. One, it's going to have to be something that has a form factor that fits with what's going on in the theater, whether that's something that, you know, sticks to the chest or wraps around an upper part of the arm, or, you know, somewhere where it's not going to interfere with the surgeon's normal activities, and ideally is comfortable for them. But it also needs to be able to measure what it is, whatever it is you're going to measure, whether it's heart rate or temperature or a combination of things. And so if if you're thinking about a design that's going to measure some kind of biological, you know, marker, or, you know, some sort of feature of the person as they're operating, you're going to have that match with what the surgical needs are going to be. And so, you know, my advice to you, since you don't have a design in mind yet, would be to actually talk to some surgeons and, you know, get some sense about, you know, what would be a limitation, or, you know, something that wouldn't work for them if they have thoughts about what they would like. Then you can really think about iterating on a design from a starting point that's informed by your eventual users.
Marcelino, did you have something to add to that?
I did. I mean, I didn't know that the surgeons take off kind of watches, but one thing I was going to suggest is, you know, to the extent possible, prototyping your idea using existing hardware and building software using things that are out there. So if there is no, you know, kind of key hardware differentiation between what you're proposing and, say, an Apple Watch, perhaps an early prototype might involve just building an Apple Watch application that allows you to test out some of the functionality. If there are limitations to the Apple Watch and that becomes a limiting factor, I agree that, you know, sitting down and chatting with surgeons to see like what might work and what their kind of process is might be an interesting starting point. You know, I'm not sure what biometrics can be obtained from a shoe insert, but perhaps, you know, something that is unobtrusive that maybe offers, you know, additional value, making it comfy. I don't know why I thought of a shoe insert, but like. Toe ring. There we go. Toe ring with, like, you know, cooling for the feet. I don't know. It just came to mind as a random idea. But working within existing systems is perhaps a good place to kind of start before developing your own hardware plan.
And I would just like to add just a business thought, which is you want to think about, like, is it the surgeon that's going to want to wear this, or is it the hospital that wants the surgeon to wear this? And if that's the case, is it only during surgery that you want them to wear it? Or is it something that you want them to wear all the time so that you can have a sense of, you know, and so it's a little bit tricky business case, because I'm not sure, you know, who's going to, you know, who's going to motivate? Is it going to be the surgeon's spouse that wants them to wear it? I mean, I don't know, but I think it's something that you think about because in this case, they probably already have a device that they wear, like Marcelino was talking about. The surgeons tend to be early adopters of non-medical technology. So thinking through that and knowing maybe it's something that just gives them an add-on when they're in, that can measure those things when they're in surgery, that might provide a value to them that isn't already being given.
Yeah, and one idea would be, I mean, if you do only want them to wear it in the OR and you want it to be very easy to do, if the wearable was integrated into the headlamp, so you put the headlamp on the surgeon when they're operating and then you take it off, if you could measure it just from the headband, that might be one way to make it very easy for them to adopt.
And then one other piece of advice I have is just to make sure you're writing down what your requirements are, even if you're still guessing. Like, what do you think are the metrics you want to know? And then the other piece of it that I wonder about is, well, how will you know if the stress level is too high? I mean, I assume everyone who's in surgery has some level of stress that is high. It's not a relaxing walk in the park. And so how are you going to figure out what that threshold is and what's an unhealthy level of stress versus a normal level of stress? What are the trials you're going to do? And then how are you going to be able to validate that? Is it going to be an FDA certified device? If so, you're going to need to show, not just verify that works, but validation that it actually does something. And then that's a process. So I assume it's going to be FDA certified for medical purposes, or is it going to be more like the Fitbit that don't certify it? This is kind of informative. And that's one of the questions you're going to have to answer.
Thank you.
That's great.
Feedback. Yeah, I was like a little confused about my plan, but yes, I got a direction. I really like that. Yes, we do have a surgeon on a board, not officially, but yes, we are in talk with one surgeon, and he left the job because of this problem. He burned out so severely that he got physical problem too, and he has some quotes about that, how the problem is so severe. So thank you so much.
Okay, so I have a couple other hands raised, and so the gift
Yes.
boat ENG.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Hi, my name is Gifty. So my team, we're trying to work on our problem statement. It's during the first week or two after discharge, surgical discharge, and follow-up. Surgical patients have limited contact with their providers, but they are high risk for complications from the procedure or high risk because of their previous medical history. So what we're trying to do is early identification of post-op complication with studies has shown it help with enhanced cost and quality control. So we are trying to decide if we are going to do a wearable device that the surgeon will give it to the patient, the high-risk patient, which could be a patient diabetic, uncontrolled diabetic that just had a total knee or total hip replacement done, high blood pressure or cholesterol, and post-operatively, this system is going to monitor their blood sugar, temperature, heart rate, and if there is any abnormal readings, the data is going to connect to the physician's office, which the physician will follow up, and also activity of daily living. Are they mobilized? Are they moving, getting steps like they were before surgery? So then the surgeon will call, or the surgeon's office will call the patient and ask, your blood sugar, I'm noticing your blood sugar is in the 300s. What have you been doing today? Or I'm noticing you didn't have enough steps for today. Are you moving around? Are you walking? That could help decrease the post-op DVT or any infection that might be rising. So we're just not sure which way we should go, if we should go the wearable or do a telecommunication, sending questionnaires to the patient for them to answer it. So we're trying to pick some brains.
That's great. It's a very important problem, and I have some thoughts on this. I'm gonna let the panel take a stab at it. I know, Dorota, you've been involved in developing wearables. Do you want to take a first stab at this question?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I guess the question is how unique are the items that you're looking for? Is it? I mean, there's glucose monitors on the market. There's blood pressure cuffs. So I would. One of the early things is to do a benchmarking study of what are all the wearables on the market, and could you just use one of those or two of those or whatever that is, because developing your own wearable with all that it's in the millions of dollars once you're said and done, from concept all the way through final manufacturing, production, all the steps that goes into that. So so in general, my advice would be if the things you're trying to track are not unique per se or something proprietary, you're going to want to tap into hardware that's out there, and then figure out what are those things. So write down what are the things that are most critical and prioritize those, because usually you want to track 50 things maybe, but 3 are the most critical, and that's talking to the surgeons and understanding what are the highest risk factors and what are the metrics and then correspond to those risk factors, and those are the ones you're going to want to figure out how to track. That's the way I would approach the problem. And then that'll help inform, does it need to be a wearable, or is it just telemedicine or some other self-reporting method going to work? And then, of course, are the patients going to wear the wearable?
Or can they wear the wearable if they've had surgery? Like, what is,
Depends on where it is. So there's a lot of questions to answer.
Yeah, I think you may be biting off a really big chunk, where in my mind focusing in on a particular problem that tends to happen over and over again, and maybe trying to go out there and figure out if you can find out a common surgical complication that you could address, and starting there might be a great way. Do you have anything to add, Marcelino, Holly, Travis?
I wholeheartedly agreed with what Dorota was saying about just using commercially available products as a starting point, especially during the prototype phase. Perhaps the innovation layer for you is the integration and sort of unique software that interpolates data across multiple devices. What are the patterns before or after a post-clinical kind of event, and could you help anticipate where some of those needs might be by combining things that already exist? So I think both from like a prototype and productization pathway, starting with commercially available stuff, is going to let you get from 0 to 1 faster. And then at some point, you might decide that you can integrate a number of things into a single device to make it easier, but certainly wouldn't start on the hardware side unless there is a very clear and demonstrable differentiation from things that are already out there.
And to that point, and on the business side, and I'm always going to come back to this because this is where I live, but there are already remote patient monitoring devices out there. There's people who bundle it and that monitor this kind of thing. I don't know that they're targeted in surgical care. So again, the value that you might bring to the table is understanding and identifying a really severe problem that costs somebody a lot of money. Okay, so once you figure that part out, then you're going to know who is the person who has their hair on fire about this problem, right? Outside of, the patient potentially, having serious complications. Patients after surgery have enough to deal with. They're not likely to be the one to, know what they're supposed to be monitoring. And depending on where they're being sent home, they may or may not be getting great discharge instructions. And so thinking through sort of identifying that thing that's really causing a problem and that's really causing a cost of money and or a reduction in quality care. And so here's something that you should be aware of from a business perspective is that if I have surgery in a hospital and I go home and then I have to get readmitted to the hospital within 90 days, Medicare is not paying for that. Nobody's paying for that. Because if it's a surgical complication that arises, the hospital eats that cost. So the person that most likely has the most desire for this are the hospitals. And so thinking through sort of like maybe what 1 or 2 of their top surgical complication problems are and trying to address those might be a great way to go about it.
That's great. I was just going to piggyback off what Charla said, and also I think it's important to focus in, but also I think really understanding what the need is by talking to patients. And I don't know through this environment if there's access to that, of how the needs came in, but understanding, like, because, you know, when a patient has a complication, they probably would call their doctor, but if they didn't, why not? And interviewing them and understanding what went wrong, and not asking them what they want, but asking them what their problem really was, and then using that to kind of stitch together what the real unmet need is. That might point you to a different direction. Like you started your question by, is it hardware, is it telehealth? Maybe it's both, but understanding what the patient's real unmet need is may be the right way. And I agree with Charlotte, the patient's not going to pay for it, but the hospital is highly motivated to do that.
I saw Leo had his hand raised, and then now I don't see him in the thing. Leo, are you still here? Did you want to ask a question? Did I lose you? Okay. Well, if he comes back, we'll make sure that we let him ask his question. Does anyone else want to run some ideas and ask some questions of the panelists? Yep, Sarah.
We're late arrival, and I heard you talking about using existing hardware, if at all possible, before developing new hardware. One question I have is, if you want to make a device and there is an existing hardware that really approximates your device, how do you get, there seems to be a chicken and the egg problem with clinical data. Like, how do you get some initial clinical data to then apply for grant funding or to pitch to investors that shows that this might work? Because you can't use it in live animals, even if it's not sterile, for instance. You're not going to get approved to do that study. So how do people go about testing clinical devices before FDA approval to get data to then bolster their case for investors?
I know Holly can answer this one. So I'll let her start.
Yeah, I do. Follow-up question. So you're saying in your case, there is no existing hardware, or there is hardware, but you can't use it clinically?
There is no existing FDA cleared hardware or reasonable hardware to try in humans, definitely, but even in animals.
Yeah, that's hard. I think so. You don't necessarily need FDA approval to do something. I don't know what your need is. If it's a high risk situation, then you likely do need an FDA exemption to be able to do any clinical research. But I know Charlotte threw it to me because we were able to, before we developed our own device, use existing hardware, and we got what's called an IRB approval to do the studies that we did. And then that initial data allowed us to raise money. So it's a tough question. I think it depends on the grant. Sometimes if you can show some reasonable proof of concept, and maybe that's by stitching together other data that's out there that may not even be yours, but that you find through literature search. And so if you say A plus B will equal what we're trying to do, you know, we're asking for a small amount of money. You know, we've had a bunch of SBIR grants at our company, and what's nice about those is they generally are in phases. And phase one, they don't expect you to have very much data already. The phase one is usually a smaller amount of money to allow you to get some of that early data. So I think understanding the risk profile of what you're trying to do, and any way you can lend credibility to it, either with existing literature that's out there, and then kind of, well, as long as you put together a really well thought out research plan, grants get excited about really novel things. And so it's hard. I don't have a great answer, but
just a really quick follow-up on that. I'm sorry to take more time, but you talked about SBIR grants. One question I had is, SBIR grants, the PI has to be more than 51% employed by the company. And so if you're a pre-revenue company, I'm an academic physician, so I am fully employed by my hospital. How do I get someone to be an employee of the company when I have no money to pay them? Is it just like equity?
Would be the grant. Well, yeah, you have equity always, and then it'd be the grant, right? The grant would fund, part of the grant you're applying for would fund their salary. So you'd find somebody who's interested in partnering with you, and then you could provide some amount of time to it. And I mean, obviously be careful and strike up a deal with someone you really trust. But absolutely, it's tricky. And there's, unfortunately, I think that leads to a lot of inequality in who can start a startup, but they kind of expect there to be scrappy and not pay yourselves in the beginning. But the grants allow for salary. So if you brought someone in to help, you know, for 51% of the time, they could be the PI and be paid by the grant.
And STTR does not require that. So just so that you know, so you should, so I know I have a spin out and I'm a co-founder. So like I'm spinning out a company out of OSU and we're going after a STTR because she's not leaving her job and I can't afford to only work on that. So we, you know, so we're doing STTR. So look into that. Yeah. Great. Looks like we have about 10 more minutes. This is great questions. We have other folks in here that might have questions for our panelists. You can throw out technical questions or business questions if you want to just like brainstorm with the group about your problem and your solution.
So I would add one more thing to, was it Sarah's question? Yeah. If you're looking for initial funding, you know, if your idea either comes out of your research or your work as a clinician at your institution, a lot of research institutions have internal funding mechanisms. OHSU has several, OSU has them, PSU does, and they're really early stage grants to answer those early questions. And they can, you know, either pay for a postdoc or sometimes a consultant, and even supplement, you know, your own salary, you know, so you can buy off of another grant you might be on. And as long as you're going through the right IRB and you have a compelling scientific question, that can be a really good way to get that early data. And then, you know, that gives you, you know, what you need to go after your SBIR, STTR, et cetera. So make sure you're asking either your commercialization office or if you have a business development group, you know, if there's some internal resources you might be able to tap into.
Yeah, that's a great point, Travis.
I have one question.
Okay.
I'm asking, is there, means as an individual person who has some idea to develop, so and not affiliated with any institute as an academia or something. So does Portland State University has this kind, or OHSU has this kind of thing that where we can continue our research?
Well, I do know that for, I don't know about research. I know that Oregon State has an accelerator for businesses and you don't have to be a part of Oregon State. You can just be a community member and be a part of that program. And it kind of teaches you, and it is this accelerator. And I would say that like there may be some universities that let outside groups come into their accelerators, but there's also a lot of free range accelerators that are out there. So folks that help people with early stage ideas. And there's definitely accelerators in the med tech space. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? I was gonna say, I think at least in Oregon, I don't know if you were, and I can't see who asked that question, so I don't.
Sorry, because of internet, I have to switch off my.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, are you in Oregon? Are you in?
Right now, I'm in Washington, but yes, Oregon is really nearby, and I'm an alumni from the Portland State University. So I'm asking, as an individual, can I go to the lab or ask for a permission for a research? Or because I went to the Washington State University and they told me that I need some funding before I enter, like a seed 1, seed 2 funding before I can start my research. So my question is that without funding, without any backup, can I start as an individual contributor or no?
Usually you do have to find a collaborator. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but I would say like try to find another professor that is interested in your work, and then that's a good way to get into that.
Yeah, geographic convenience, you know, or some kind of connection to an institution you've attended or graduated from is always nice. But, you know, what I would recommend is looking at, you know, go to Google Scholar, go to the med journals, and find some researchers who are interested in the area that you are, even if it's at an institution you don't know, or someone you haven't chatted with before. and try to strike up a conversation with them. Universities generally don't allow folks to come in and use labs or equipment, unless it's something that's just like a microscope that you can have them, run a quick study on. But if you're going to do real research, you need a collaborator. And that's going to be driven by, faculty members' interest. So finding that group of folks that are doing research in your area is key if you want to go through a university environment.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to try that thing. But yes, actually, I did MBA and I want to continue this research. I found biomarkers really interesting, and I think I have some idea to develop more. So I will definitely gonna try your ideas. Thank you.
That's so exciting. And then, just one other note to that, there is, and I'm assuming it's in the life sciences, healthcare kind of space. Life Sciences Washington, now that you're up in Washington, might also have some ideas or resources or someone to connect you with as well. I don't know enough about that organization, but it seems like that's something that they might be helpful with.
Definitely, I will look into. Thank you.
Yeah, if you go to the LSINW or Life Science Washington webpage, they have a really strong mentor program with some contacts, and everyone there is really friendly. So if you send a note to, whoever's currently listed on their contact page, they will find someone for you to talk to and try to get you in the system.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Definitely. I'm going to try this in a week.
That's great. So we have about time for probably one more question. And before I lead into that, I just wanted to make everyone aware that Natalie has posted a questionnaire in the chat. It would be great if all of you could fill that out at the end of the panel so that we can get some feedback on the session. Does anyone else have a question for our panelists before we wrap up?
I have another question if no one else does. I don't want to monopolize the panel.
Go for it.
All right. So if you have just like a simple device, how do you choose whether to try to bring it to market by yourself or license it to another company? What are the factors that go into your decision making there?
That's a business question probably as to how much capital you want to raise and what your exit strategy is. So if you have a CEO that knows or want to become a CEO that knows how to run a company for 5 to 7 years or however long it's going to be, and then figure out if you're going to then sell it, then you do it yourself. If you want to continue in your day job and just are really excited about the technology, then you get it to proof of concept and then you license it to a company that has all the infrastructure that already can bring it to market. So that's kind of a personal and a business question that you have to answer as to what you want to do with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It may depend on the market need too. It's harder in the med tech world to actually do it on the licensing route. They want to actually have it often through the FDA and in sales before they'll acquire you, which is a bummer, but happens to be some part of the problem. So it really depends. But it's always good to start talking to companies early once you've got your patent protections in place. And I think the earlier, the better, because then you'll know interest. Anyone else want to talk about that? Travis, you may have a little bit of experience with that since you're in the IP and innovation space at PSU.
Yeah, I was going to add on, with your patent comment, if you're going to talk about licensing to a company, you really need to have your sort of intellectual property in order, whether that's, a really unique proprietary data set, some patents, or some software that is private. It's very difficult to license to a company if you don't have really strong IP protection. Because there's a good chance that another company, if they're a licensed candidate, could really just redevelop what you already have. And so in those early stages, make sure you talk to some really competent folks about having a good IP strategy, whether that's patents or something else, and make sure that you're ready to have those conversations with external folks.
That's great. I feel like you just gave me a great layup because I was just going to mention that if anybody wants to come stop by the Adventuring channel at any point in time, we're IP strategy experts. So that's a lot of what we do. We also will be writing checks for early stage companies, probably starting Q1 next year. So, and then anything related to medtech, digital health, if you just want to ping questions, you can ping me in the Catalyze channel. I'm happy to answer afterwards. I want to thank all of our panelists for helping today and for all of you guys for all your questions. I'm so excited to see what comes out of this event. And I know you're going to have a long night, so enjoy and have fun. Thanks, guys. And don't forget to fill out the survey.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.